This is a part 2. If you want to understand everything we're talking about, watch part 1 first, but you'll figure it out. We're starting on a fresh section named Creation.
Well, see, the idea is the same, but the mystery remains.
The idea of what is the same as what? Did I miss something? I mean, you just started this section of the video, and it seems like you're in the middle of a thought. Whatever, people probably feel the same whenever they start watching a part 2 of one of my videos, so.
The mystery is, how do you go from nothing to something?
That's the mystery, is it? I mean, I guess if you propose it as a mystery, then it's a mystery. How is it the mystery? I mean, personally, I think that a bigger mystery that would be more important to figure out first is, can there actually be nothing? In the commonly understood sense of nothing exists, nothing is true, there is no way that anything has to work, that is, laws of physics. Nothing happens, nothing does anything. Is this even a thing that can be at all? Is this a possible state of reality, the total absence of anything? Even like quantum effects? And if so, the second question, do you actually go from that to something? Was there at any point literally nothing? I mean, in the religious conception, the answer is no, right? There was God. And I'm certainly not aware of any scientific consensus that dogmatically insists that prior to the universe, prior to the Big Bang, there was literally nothing. In fact, I think the only people I've heard dogmatically insist that before the universe there must have been absolute nothingness are religious people trying to either denigrate science or argue for God. So the point is, I find it a bit odd to say that how do you get something from nothing is the mystery, when you have all these other mysteries that you have to assume the answers to because this question is based on those mysteries, and you haven't even addressed any of those. Like, maybe if you really want to have this conversation, you should start from the actual start of it.
And whether you're doing it scientifically or you're doing it religiously, it's the same question.
Well, yeah, it's the same question that really doesn't make a whole lot of sense as a starting point. But the conflict between science and religion is not whether the questions are the same, is it? Like, what is the origin of the diversity of life? Well, if you answer it religiously or you answer it scientifically, it's the same question. Okay, but we have totally different answers that we arrived at by totally different means. That's what we're talking about. That's where the problem is.
Because we both agree, science and Torah agree, the world started at a certain point.
The world, yeah. As for the universe, indications are that at some point in the past it was all compressed into a single point. But as for that point, did it start at a certain point? Is there anything outside of that point? Were there physical laws? Were there things occurring around that point? What does that even mean if space-time is contained within that point? Were there other such points? The questions go on and on and on. You're trying to basically dumb down scientific inquiry to the level of Abrahamic religion, and it's never that simple. It's never just, well, the universe is big now and it was small before, so the universe must have just popped out of nothing. That's the only possible explanation. I'm not going to think anywhere beyond that. That's not what the scientific community's doing. That's what you wish they were doing.
It didn't always exist.
Wow, how'd you figure that out? Nobody else has managed that. Can I see your papers? Oh, right, you made it up to make science sound more like your religion. Never mind.
So if it wasn't, how did it become?
Tell you what, go back to the drawing board, figure out how to prove that prior to the Big Bang, there was literally nothing. Not nothing in the physics sense of like quantum something something. No, nothing. Prove it, which is an awfully tall order, and then we can have a discussion about how hard it is to answer questions that frankly at this point are kind of irrelevant. We both agree the moon had to be made from cheese, so how did that happen? Hold up, since when do we agree on that? Why are you trying to start the conversation by projecting your ideas onto me?
That's a mystery.
No, it's not a mystery why you do that.
And we gave up on figuring out how. We're just trying to understand when.
Oh.
So, on the question of how old the universe is, science is starting with a big assumption.
A big assumption like what? Prior to the universe, there was nothing at all? All of something had to just come from nothing? And this is the only possible answer and nobody's ever questioned this assumption? Oh right, never mind. Those are all your assumptions.
If the world came into existence in an embryonic state...
Embryonic state? That's a weird way to put it, but I guess I get what you're driving at.
How long would it take for it to become the condition that it's in today?
I don't know. What is the gestation period for a universe?
And they're probably right. It would take billions of years.
Oh man, I feel sorry for the mother universe.
But that's on the assumption that the world was once embryonic, that the world was born like a baby.
Wait, so if the universe close to the start is described as embryonic, and the universe today is described as having been born like a baby, what stage of the universe's development counts as the birth? Now there's an important mystery.
Started off tiny, and then it matured, and then it grew.
And then it was born? When? No, really, I feel like you're leaving out some important information on how this all works.
The Torah says God created the world complete, old, finished. There was never an embryonic world.
Yeah. I says otherwise. So can we go back to the birth thing?
Like, for example, when Adam and Eve were created, they were never fetuses. They were never babies. They were never in diapers. They were created 20 years old on the day that they were created.
Okay, weird. I can pretty much get on board with the creation of Adam and Eve as adults thing. It's more or less implied by the way Genesis 2 reads. But to say they were created 20 years old, by which I guess you mean how they would look if they were 20 years old, well, I think I know where you're getting that, and I'd like you to give it a wash before you hand it to me.
So they were created adults. Trees were created with fruit, not seeds.
And God said, "Let the earth sprout vegetation, seed-bearing plants, fruit trees of every kind on earth that bear fruit with the seed in it. And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, seed-bearing plants of every kind, and trees of every kind bearing fruit with the seed in it. So God commanded earth to sprout vegetation." So the plants may or may not have started from seeds, but that doesn't sound like they started off full grown. But of course, if you're taking this as the 6 literal creation days thing, then you could say that within the 3rd day, he'd commanded the plants to sprout, and they'd sprouted, and the trees had fruit on them. It's not what you said. It doesn't sound like the trees started off fully grown. They just grew really fast. I don't even know why I'm bothering with this, though. What's the point? I mean, whether in the book Adam and Eve or fruit trees were created fully grown doesn't tell us anything about anything outside the book.
So if Adam and Eve chopped down a tree, how many rings would they find in that tree?
10 glorpillion.
Maybe hundreds. But the tree is only 3 days old. So the world was created mature.
Wow, what a cool story. I know where you're going with this. Science says such and such is this and that old because it looks old. Every possible measurement that we can come up with corroborates that. But it could be that it's not old and it was just created to look that way. And look, the Torah says that. Well, alright then, you know what? If the Torah is true, then hey, maybe that's the reason, but first we have to actually establish the Torah is true. Don't get ahead of yourself. All we have right now is, on the one hand, everything about all this stuff looks old, which if we apply Occam's razor, by far the simplest explanation is it is old. And on the other hand, or I should say on one of our many other hands, your book that implies that some things that God created were created to look old, specifically the original humans and the original trees, none of which have survived up to this point, if true. Adam and Eve died, and then the trees would have lived at most until Noah's flood. But for some reason you're taking the implication that they were created to look old as an implication that everything else was created to look old, despite it not actually saying that. But you know what, I'll just give it to you. Fine, Genesis says everything was created to look old. The universe, stars, planets, fossils that by every indication have been in the ground for millions of years. I guess you just put those there when he created the earth to mess with people. So why should we toss out the most obvious and simple explanation, which is that stuff that shows every sign of being old actually is, and instead believe your interpretation of your book, which is that a God created the universe and created every single thing about it to look as if it was not as young as it is, including millions of apparently ancient fossils? Is the reason we would make this ridiculous leap just, well, I don't know, maybe that's what happened? Or do you have a good reason?
If it had been created embryonic and had to age over time, then yes, it would have taken billions of years. But it didn't happen that way.
Oh, we're not even doing the maybe game anymore, hey? Now it's just, nah, didn't happen. Okay.
And it's very logical. God created the world because he wanted to see something happen. He didn't want to sit and wait billions of years for the world to get ready.
Sit and wait? What are you saying, God's subject to time? I thought he created time. I thought he transcended time. Why the hell would a being like that have to sit and wait for anything?
So he created the world complete. He didn't create babies, he created adults who could do something useful.
To be clear, that's not God not wanting to wait billions of years for the universe to form. That's him not wanting to wait 20 years for 2 people to grow up. Impatient, jeez. Maybe he just doesn't like changing diapers.
He created trees with fruit. He created an earth with diamonds, with gas, with oil. because he wanted a complete world and wouldn't wait for it to mature on its own.
I'm still really stuck on this fossils thing, though. I mean, of all the things that appear old, that's gotta be about the most misleading one, right? And the one with really no conceivable purpose besides that. You could say diamonds and oil and whatever, maybe they have some sort of a purpose. You know, God eventually wanted us to invent cars and diamond saw blades, I don't know. But it seems to me the only thing fossils really do is support evolution. And if evolution's wrong, then for some reason God put something into the earth that really only serves the purpose of deceiving people.
You know what the real issue is?
I know a lot of them.
The real issue is that the scientists don't want to deal with a certain question.
Okay, what question?
And they're going to have to deal with this question.
All right, buddy, hit me. What question?
Because if you don't deal with this question, you'll never really understand this world.
All right, got it. I want to understand the world. What's the question?
As a scientist,
Ugh.
the question is not how did the world come into existence, but why.
I don't see much difference, to be honest. I mean, sure, if you have some entity with a will that wants to do something, then how and why are kind of separate questions. The question of how God created the universe would be very different from why God created the universe. But if you're talking about some sort of physical process, then how it happened and why it happened are the exact same thing. Oh, when I put chemical A with chemical B, this happened. How did that happen? Why did that happen? To my mind, those are the exact same question. Either way, what the questioner is looking for is an explanation of the reaction. And in the case of the origin of the universe, what the questioner is looking for is an explanation for the origin of the universe. By what means did this universe originate? Now, if somehow you manage to prove that the means by which it originated was creation by a god, then sure, at that point I would certainly ask, why did that god want to do that? But that's not what we're talking about here, so it doesn't really matter.
So here's the logic.
Oh, I thought logic was like a thing of science that can't be the final word. So I got your go-ahead to throw out everything you say from now on and believe whatever I want, right?
What science is trying to do is come to the conclusion through logic. That can't be the final word. In the beginning, there was one thing.
Oh, I thought we were starting from in the beginning there was nothing, and we had to get to something, and now there was always something. So scientists have to assume that something came from nothing, and you get to believe that something came from something. These are the rules of the game, apparently. Because...
one absolute, self-sustaining, eternal being, whatever you want to call it, a subatomic particle.
Hold up, so you're trying to describe the universe as it existed pre-Big Bang. Your understanding is what scientists say it was is a subatomic particle. Is that right? If that's the case, what the hell was the point of all that nonsense about you have to figure out the answer to how something can come from nothing? What, is all that just wiped out now? A totally irrelevant waste of my time?
That was the one thing that existed at the beginning. And from that, everything else evolved.
The implications of you using the word evolved there make me a little bit uncomfortable. It gets me just a little worried for what might be coming next. But again, this really sounds like you're trying to describe a scientific understanding of the universe that does not involve something coming from nothing. So why the mind change?
The real question is, why would anything evolve?
Why is that the real question? Wait. The real question is, why would anything evolve? Why would something change? If you're going to describe change within the universe as the universe evolving, then that's something that happens post-Big Bang. So the answer to why it would evolve would be that it's a universe expanding rapidly from a tiny point. Of course some changes are going to happen. That's a physical inevitability.
There's only one thing that exists, and it always existed. Now what?
What now what? Oh, so the why would evolution happen was just you being sloppy with your language, and what you actually meant was, why would the Big Bang start at all? So to start with, just like scientists don't assume that there was nothing and then suddenly there was something, I also don't think scientists by default assume that the universe originated from some infinitely existing object. You keep making these assumptions on their behalf, but I don't know why you keep trying to put them in these little boxes. I mean, sure, both of these ideas have been put forth, of course, but even the idea of nothing that's being talked about with stuff like quantum fluctuations causing the universe, it's not the kind of nothing that you're probably thinking of, and it's not the only idea. There is no idea on this subject which is undisputed. This is a big old messy complicated subject. It's one where observational evidence is pretty much non-existent and theoretical evidence is, well, hard to come by and subject to change. But for some reason you're acting as if the people who are studying this are bound to one or two preset options. That's frankly idiotic.
Do you see the problem?
Look, I see a lot of problems with figuring out the origin of the universe. As scientific problems go, that might be the most difficult nut to crack. I see a lot of problems. The scientists who work on it, who know this stuff a whole hell of a lot better than I do, I'm sure see far more problems. But none of their problems and none of my problems come from anyone being stuck in the little boxes you're trying to shove them into to make arguing for your religion easier.
So the scientists come up with a theory of a Big Bang. There were two things, and they collided, and that's what started the whole process.
What the hell are you talking about? That is not the Big Bang Theory. In fact, you should even know that, because didn't you just say that the scientists only talk about the Big Bang Theory that only goes back to the start of the universe and does not address the origin of the universe? But now apparently the Big Bang Theory is that the origin of the universe was that two objects collided. Do you even listen to yourself?
But you can't begin with two things.
Why not? If you're just making shit up, seems to me you can start with as many things as you want.
You got to start with one of the two.
Why? Because again, you want to try to make people think more in line with your religion? Not that anyone's thinking about two things colliding to cause the Big Bang, but still, if you can have one subatomic particle, you can have two.
But if you start with one, it's the end of the story.
Hey, it's your story, man. You can make it end however you like.
There was one thing, and it always existed. And then what happened?
I don't know, man. Apparently Big Bang cosmologists think there were two subatomic particles that smashed into each other. News to me, but apparently that's the case. So in that case, I guess it's up to you to answer the question about what happens if there's one thing, because according to you, that's your idea, not theirs.
It exploded? Why would it explode?
No, and I don't know. Could you just get to the point and tell me?
It started to evolve? Why would it evolve?
I don't even know what it is. Why are we talking about your weird Big Bang fanfic? Or, what's the opposite of fanfic? Hate fic?
It's already perfect.
What does perfect mean in the sense of a physical object? How do you objectively determine the perfection of one object over another, and why should we expect that perfection would be permanent? At this point, trying to keep track of your assertions and claims and misunderstandings and assumptions is like trying to keep track of every little burst at a fireworks show.
You see, you have to ask why, not how.
Dude, that would be asking how. If you have an object and an event occurs involving said object, asking why said event occurs and asking how said event occurs is the same question. You're asking what the cause was. You haven't even told me what you think the difference is. How about you start with that before you start scolding people for asking the wrong question out of two identical questions?
And that's why believing in God is the only thing that makes sense, because belief in God simply means whatever existed for real, whatever, maybe it was a subatomic particle, but it was a subatomic particle that wants something.
Alright, people, so the new revised Big Bang Theory. Before the existence of the universe, there was one and only one subatomic particle existing in absolute nothingness, and there were no other subatomic particles around because, of course, that makes no sense. Why it makes no sense, we're not 100% sure, but it makes no sense, damn it. The subatomic particle, being a subatomic particle, was of course objectively perfect, and therefore by no physical means, known or unknown, could it possibly explode. But this little subatomic particle felt real discouraged that he was so small and so lonely, and so he wanted and he wanted and he wanted even harder, and eventually his perfect little self exploded for no real reason, because as we know there was no physical possible way for that to happen, and he, or I should say she, was suddenly pregnant with all sorts of other embryonic subatomic particles to keep her company. And that's the story of God in the Torah. And that's my paper on the Big Bang. Here you go, university professor dude. PhD, please.
And because it wants, it created.
Interesting. Why did it start to want right at that moment, and not at any point for the eternity before that apparently is a thing? For that matter, how does a subatomic particle want something? And how did it create? Have you answered any questions with this, or have you just created more?
So what is God? What do we mean when we say God?
Well, I don't know, but from the sounds of it, the whole damn Torah can go in the garbage, because that apparently has nothing to do with it.
We mean the original being, whatever that was, that wants something.
You sound like a deist, but you talk about Genesis. Could you pick one?
So if you believe that there was a subatomic particle that wanted to evolve, well, that's God.
So inspiring.
You can call him subatomic if you want to, but basically that's God.
And if I call him a mind-bogglingly stupid idea, then what? Anyway, thanks for coming by to watch. There's going to be one more part, which will get me through all the rest of the video. So come back for part 3. There'll be some discussion of evolution and stuff like that. If you like the video, do me a favor before you go and give it a like and click subscribe if you haven't. Big thanks to all of my supporters on every platform, and I'll see you next time.